think one of the most exhausting experiences we have in life are when we're trying to upkeep our values against people who don't have the shared values.
Hello and welcome to the Elite Foundations podcast. Today, we're going to be doing something a little bit different. We're going to be talking about boundaries. Itamar, hit me.
All right. So the reason this came about is this is a problem I see with a lot of clients. And Emil also wanted to talk about this.
Yeah.
And we didn't have one big mega case study like, hey, this person, this was the only thing that changed and then everything went through the roof. But this is a crucial piece that I've seen with pretty much everybody who's had a big turnaround to really establish boundaries and to not have other things that they shouldn't have in their life weigh them down. And that's really what we want to talk about today.
Yeah, I think this came about from me saying, one of the biggest things I've kind of got from this situation, or, from me doing the arena before Christmas and interacting with you in general has been that I've set much better boundaries. And you kind of said something like, boundaries are bullshit, or boundaries are, it's not about boundaries.
It's not about setting boundaries and trying to enforce them. That's what I think the main problem is.
Yeah. So we'll get into that, but that's how it started. Similar to the values thing. I was like, I've been working on my values. My values are amazing. You're like, your values are bullshit. And I'm like, oh.
I don't think I said it like that. I think I was a bit more gentle, perhaps. I think
you said, can I be honest with you?
Exactly. It was sure. One of those.
Your values are bullshit. That's how it went down.
That's fair. That could have been it.
Yeah. And I mean, this may be a whole other podcast, but this level of feedback seems really, really savage. But I kind of feel that the more to the point feedback is, the more constructive it can be without worrying too much about offending people, especially with the kind of relationship we have. The quicker you can grow. And I always say feedback is a two-way thing. It's one, the person giving it, and they do have to consider things, but also the person receiving it can create a space where they can really upgrade the level of feedback they receive by not taking things personally or emotionally.
But I think in order to do that, you have to establish a desired outcome, a mutual desired outcome. So in like the military, you start giving very brutal feedback very quickly, and there's no thank yous or please because there's no time for that. Because it's very, very clear that we want to be able to save each other's asses if something goes wrong, and we have to communicate very crisp. Now, it's like the same here as a friendship. We have really established that we want what's best for each other as friends. And because that's the underlying premise, it's easy for us to give each other feedback because we know the intention there is it's a positive one.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then that is a different pod.
That's a whole discussion. Let's move
back
on
to boundaries.
Back to how shit my boundaries are. No, I'm joking.
All right. So this is the point I kind of want to make, that I feel that setting boundaries and trying to really enforce them, let's call it, is wasted energy. It's like you're wasting your energy on, let's call it the symptom, not the root cause. The reality is that boundaries with others are just a downstream effect of clarifying who you really are. If you don't focus on boundaries and trying to set them and enforce them, but instead you focus on really defining and getting clear on who you are and what you're willing to accept in your life and what you're not, you actually won't need to enforce them as much because they'll be so clear to others. It's like how, I think you've spoken about this before. If somebody says, I'm not really in the mood for cake right now, people will be like, have some cake. But if you say, no, I don't have any desserts before 6 p.m. People are like, okay, he doesn't have any. That's pretty clear. No need to test his boundaries. No need to push it. And I think there's a lot of wasted energy that people go into trying to enforce boundaries instead of just making very clear what they actually want. And then people can see that you're not clear. So, okay, let me test that. Let me see if I can rattle that a bit.
Yeah. So you're saying that if you're not clear on what you want and yes, who you are by extension, then other people will sense that, will feel that, will identify that, and will test it and push it. So by setting a boundary first, like I'm not going to eat dessert, rather than having this kind of this definition of yourself, this view of yourself that, for whatever reason, that's not something you do. It's a flimsy boundary. You're not convinced by it, therefore no one else is convinced by it. Is that about right?
No.
That's it. Hit me. This is why I'm here.
The way I would say it's, again, at the very, very, very core of it, you have to be clear on who you are and what you want out of life. So you have to be clear on what you want out of life. From that, you distill who you are, what kind of person you want to be. From that, you distill your boundaries. Now, most people don't even know what they want out of life, let alone who they need to be in order to have that. So they try to set these boundaries, but they're not really bought into these boundaries. They're trying to say that, oh, I should have these boundaries, or I should not drink, or I should not eat this, but they can't really explain why. And people with this blink test, you can kind of see it. People test your boundaries because they want you to do something that they can enjoy as well. Drink with them, eat with them. Honestly, also give you unsolicited advice, whatever it may be. They want to enforce something onto your life. But if they see an opportunity there, they're more likely to try to engage it. If they're so clear that like there's no opportunity here, Emil just knows this is who he is. This is what he doesn't accept in life. Okay, that's fair. I'm not gonna. I feel no need to waste energy trying to challenge that.
I feel we're saying the same thing, but you've thought it through more. But when you explain it, then I'm like, that's what I'm trying to say. So no, it's good that you've mentioned that. And actually, a kind of, I suppose, example of that is like when you don't want to, go to a party or something, and you say, come to the party. No, I can't, or not tonight. And that's kind of a firm boundary, fine. But if you say, no, I can't because I'm a little bit tired, and you start kind of giving these bullshit excuses, people see that as a gap and they're like, oh, but you only need to stay for a little bit, or, you can do the work you wanted to do tomorrow. Whereas if you're just like, no, not for me tonight, thanks. Don't try and fluff around. Don't show the weakness. Don't show the uncertainty, perhaps.
Yeah, but again, like if there'll be weakness if you have an internal weakness, if you're not really settled into that idea. And that's where you got to establish that. Like, what do you really want?
Yeah.
That's, I think, the big thing.
And you're going to go into this now, but you kind of have to, you have to start somewhere. You have to almost start by setting, I don't know, is it a cyclical thing? You kind of set the boundary and then look at who you want to be, or look at who you want to be and then set the boundary, and it kind of
option B. I think that's the best way to do it. You really get clear on who you are. And from there on, the boundaries, again, they just happen. Because it's so obvious to you what you want and you don't want. Now, let me put it this way. In a tiny, tiny little way, it is cyclical. Because if you don't have any boundaries in your life, you won't have the time to really establish who you want to be and think about this stuff. If you're just allowing people to take your time and have negative influences on you all the time, then you won't be able to get your head out of the water and really like understand what's going on. So it is that a little bit, but the primary thing is to really get clear on what you want, then figure out who you need to be in order to have that, and then understand, okay, this person, what would their boundaries be? And so you can really buy into it.
So then just to push that a little bit further, you've done, what you want, who you need to be to achieve that. And then you almost need to see how that manifests in the world, as in, how does that look compared to a party? How does that look compared to a coffee? How does that look compared to things? So that's where I mean, kind of like, you almost need to make these decisions. You can't figure out all the examples straight away. Like, even though, yes, you want this, and to do that, you need to do this, but then you have to figure out how that fits with the specific boundaries and cases. Yeah or nay?
Yes. Like, I think Emerson said it best. I don't remember the exact quote, but he basically said, a man who grasps tactics will be lost once you diverge from the path, but the man who understands principles can apply tactics at will. And it's the same thing. If you understand from a principle level, like, what are you interested in? What are you not interested in your life? Figuring that out on the spot is really easy and really simple.
Yeah. You're going to give some examples now. So I think that will help to kind of give practical advice in how this might look, right?
Yeah. So here's an interesting example. So one of my clients, he does consulting work, and he asked me, like, how do you deal with all the requests that you get from people from asking for advice, free advice, and so on and so on? I get inundated with my inbox. And I was like, take a guess how many requests I've gotten this year. And he was like, hundreds. I was like, I've literally gotten one request from a former client asking me for 15 minutes. And he was like, what do you mean? And I was like, I think it's just clear that people understand these are my boundaries. I'm not just going to devalue myself. And it's a lot of times about just, again, like, this isn't a great example of how to do this, but to establishing that fact that if you really are sure in yourself, it shines through. People will know, and you don't have to actually enforce the boundaries. I think that's the first thing I really want to get across. Like, you don't have to enforce boundaries if you're really clear on them.
I think we had this exact conversation a few weeks back. This wasn't me. No, this wasn't me. No,
this wasn't you. No,
we had a very similar conversation. No, but I said a similar thing. People are asking for things, and how do you deal with it? and you kind of said the same thing. And then I said, okay, well, what the hell? Like, why is this happening to me, kind of thing? And you said, well, on some level, you invite this. And that was like a baseball bat to the face of like, oh, I understand now. And then I saw it. It just suddenly became crystal clear. It was like seeing the Matrix all of a sudden. Like, oh, I can kind of see the event which caused blah 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 blah, which created the boundary challenge, should we say?
So why do you think you were inviting it?
Oh, people pleasing, scarcity of opportunity. So wanting to field as many opportunities as possible, and wanting self-worth by having people asking things of me because I wasn't confident in the self-worth. So I needed people to want me, to need me. So I'd be like, yeah, I'm fucking important. Because you can imagine, like your example, like only one person asked you for advice in 12 months. Like lesser people would be like, maybe no one gives a fuck, right? Maybe no one respects me, and no, that's why no one wants advice. But it takes like a very strong, confident, self-assured person to be like, this is the reason, because I've shut it down at the roots.
Yeah. It's interesting. So I want to ask you a follow-up question to that. You were saying that you were opening these kind of doors so that people will ask you. Were you subconsciously hoping they'll ask you, even though you'd say no? Because then you'd feel this, like, I said no to options. I said no to people's requests, and that means I'm desired in some way.
No, it was a scarcity thing, a self-worth thing, where I was worried that I wouldn't be able to succeed without, without connections, without interactions, without pleasing people, without people pleasing. And then when the actual repercussions happened, which I kind of didn't connect initially, where I have lots of people asking for lots of things, I was like, I can't, like, now this has suddenly come to light that if I want to succeed as to who I want to be, I can't field everything. I can't deal with everything. So I need to start saying no.
Okay, so here's a big thing. Is it only can't, or also you don't need to? Coming to that recognition.
So yeah, one, I can't physically, which was probably what started off the, oh shit, I need to fix this. And then two, then you get to the realization, then I got to the realization of more abundance, of like, I don't need to, and I need to start being more intentional with this. And then I kind of started to like come up with this concept of like, call it intentional networking or whatever like that, where you're just more intentional about it. And then that's how I've kind of processed what you've said. But yeah, it's essentially, I was inviting it. I was 100% inviting it out of, go on.
Do you remember what we said about what kind of people you should hang out with? Are we allowed to say this on air, Emil? We're allowed to put you on the spot.
Well, how do I can't remember. What did I say?
Yes, you do. You do recognize, man. It's like, if you're trying to do exceptional things in your life, you don't have room for unexceptional people. That's just the reality of it.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. And that's not even, that's essentially what intentional networking is. And on a very, very understandable level, there's certain interactions which drain energy and which make you feel like shit and which don't add value to your life. And then there's certain interactions which light a fire in your fucking soul and make you feel amazing. And as an introvert, when I gain energy from an interaction, I'm like, oh, wow. Okay, that was powerful. That was incredible. And then I kind of realized, okay, how can I find more of these? Because this is now my standard.
So I think also, like, the big thing in finding more of those is you have to eliminate everything that doesn't do that. You can't have everything. That's
cost.
the thing.
You can't, exactly.
Yep.
And that's another realization is, by saying yes to everything, you're saying no to a hell of a lot of things.
Yeah.
But then once you start like zooming out perspective and you're like, okay, I spent 50% of my time with draining interactions and 50% with amazing ones. Like, why 50-50? Like, why not 95 energizing interactions?
Again, I think it's because you're not clear on what interactions you need and what serves you. It's like, again, that's what I'm saying. The moment you can really get clear on what you want out of life, you can set your priorities. The moment you can set your priorities, the boundaries kind of just happen. And then you don't give space.
I wonder if this is just your, no, it's not that I don't like it. It's just this feels like, it feels robotic. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. Like, I'm, all about the cyborg, but it just, for mere mortals, it just feels like there's just say what you want. Because I don't feel that was the case for me. Like, I
think you weren't clear on what you want. It's not that
Agreed,
you
but
didn't say what you want. That was the big issue. You weren't clear on what you want. So let's put it this way. Let's say me and you are having a discussion. We're having, let's say, an argument over something. If I'm absolutely certain about the facts and I know my side of it, and I'm like, this is just fact and this is just truth, and you have no idea what you're talking about, and I have that confidence, I'll voice it out. If I don't have confidence in what I'm saying, because I'm not really assured of it, then I'll probably take a back seat and let you challenge me. I'm saying you weren't extremely confident and assured about what you actually want. And therefore, whenever somebody would challenge that, you would be willing to accept it. You know, and maybe I do want to stay out late to do this. Maybe I do want to hang out with these people or whatever it may be. I'm saying that's the thing. Once you have assurance on really what you want, you're more confident to speak up.
But this is where I think the cyclical nature comes in, because I don't think people decide what they want like that. I think they decide what they want, and then they see how the boundaries and interactions and real life scenarios fit in with that. And then they go back and refine what they want. And then they go back and, you know, recheck their boundaries. And then it kind of goes back and forth. Because for me, it didn't happen overnight. It's been an ongoing process, and it will continue to be an ongoing process. And I make mistakes.
I agree with you on a high level, but I think there needs to be added context to it. So I think the stress testing it, so to speak, like you said, like going out there and testing your boundaries and all that, that would probably take, honestly, 10% of the effort. I think 90% of the effort that will create the 100% of the result will be really focusing and establishing what you want, getting clear on who you want to be and what you want. And that's the thing that most people don't do. And like, unless you do that, you can't actually stress test anything. And that's why I say, this is what I preach: get clear on who you are, what you want to do in your life. And then the boundaries will kind of come from there.
Most people don't know that. And just telling
most people
them
don't know that. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, and telling people to figure it out, like there's a gap there. Like, it's not something that you're like, oh shit, I should have just figured it out. Like, okay, give me 2 minutes, let me figure this out. Like, it takes time.
Okay, so this is I agree, but why is it wrong to tell people, listen, this is important, so take the time and put in the work, and then you can have the rewards afterwards? Like, I don't
Agreed.
honestly, like,
100%
that's what I'm saying.
Agreed.
I'm not saying it's easy. Let's put it this way. I'm not saying that figuring stuff is easy. I'm just saying it's necessary.
Yeah, but I'm trying to
all the energy people waste on it. Sorry, I'm just gonna go to a little bit of a rant, but all the time and effort and energy and angst people waste on trying to effectively enforce their boundaries could be much better spent elsewhere. That's what I'm saying.
Agreed. My point is, in the real world, right, where we live, it doesn't happen like that. And it inevitably becomes a cyclical thing, because people aren't going to spend, 3 days in meditation trying to figure out exactly what they want, and how much is just societal programming and parental influence and, validation from their peers and bullshit, and how much they truly want. It's a cyclical thing, exactly like your arena, right? It goes round in loops, and you peel off the layers of the onion, like Shrek, which you've never seen. Still,
it's killing you there. I've never seen Shrek.
It's ridiculous.
When my son gets to that age, I'll watch it with him.
Exactly. And he'll be like 10x more wise than you from it. But like, what you want as the top layer has a certain set of boundaries, but then you peel to the next layer, and that changes. Like, what you want changes as you mature, as you grow, as you figure shit out. And therefore the boundaries will change as well. Like, it's like in real life. I mean, maybe I'm talking from my experience. Maybe I'm shit at this. Maybe I haven't dedicated enough time to this. Maybe I'm still not crystal clear.
I can tell you this. I'm speaking of this less from theory and more from this is something I do with my clients all the time. A lot of them have to establish boundaries, and it's a lot of issue that a lot of them have. And when I've tried at the beginning to say, okay, like, what are quick wins? What are boundaries you should set in your life? When I was just beginning coaching, it never worked. There's always that layer of resistance. Like, I don't want to do that though, because then like people will judge me. Like, I don't want to be an unpleasant person. Like, these are polite people. So why should I leave this mastermind or exit this WhatsApp group or leave this group of friends that I've known for a long time?
Yeah.
That doesn't work. Once we actually establish, okay, forget about this for a second. What do you really want out of life? And they say, okay, this is what I want. And we figure that out and we nail it in. Again, it gets refined, but we nail it in like a basic version, a V1.
Yeah.
Then we can say, okay, honest perspective. If somebody wanted this V1 of what they want out of life, can they pull it off while also having this in their life? These people, this WhatsApp group, that mastermind, these weak boundaries with parents, with family members, with contractors, whatever it may be. Is this possible? And then they're like, dang, that's not possible. And I think that gives them the realization then, okay, I need to live up to this.
Agreed. 100%. We're on exactly the same page here. V1, set of boundaries. Those boundaries unlock V2. V2, new boundaries. Boundaries, they unlock V3. Layers of an onion. I feel we're on the same page.
I feel like I want to give a lot more emphasis to getting clear on who you are and being comfortable with who you are. And I think the comfortable maybe is like the fact that what I haven't been speaking, because I think the stress testing, it's less, honestly. I give it less weight. I think once you get clear on what you want, once you get comfortable with who you are and being that person that you're trying to be, the rest of the stress testing and all that, like it doesn't weigh as much.
So let's reframe it from stress testing and then potentially move on to the second example. But let's reframe it from stress testing to expanding to the limits of your current capability, and then living those boundaries. And then those boundaries unlock new limits of capability. It's not stress testing to check it. It's literally working at your limits, which then unlocks the next level.
What do you mean by boundaries? What do you think of the boundaries that you hit?
Well, like, for example, 5 years ago, I left, or 7 years ago now, whatever, I left a WhatsApp group because it was just like they were taking the piss out of me for posting on Instagram, right? And lol, jokes on them. And like, that was me. I knew I wanted to be something, and I had some boundaries and I acted on them. Like, who I want to be now, 7 years later, is a totally different person. Like, you know, WhatsApp groups, I'm super easy to leave. Like, that's a very strong boundary, but there's new boundaries now, which I'm kind of trying to figure out. And so there's a new version of me. And I imagine in 5-10 years time, there'll be another new version, which requires new boundaries. No?
Do I have your permission to challenge you on that?
Always. All
right. So I think it's less honestly to do with a new version of you. It's more to do with you becoming more and more comfortable in your own skin and not seeking out validation and all that. Now, when you go to higher levels and now you're not networking, let's say your WhatsApp group all of a sudden is not those 7 guys from back home who never did anything, but now there are other 7-figure or 8-figure entrepreneurs. Then you feel a bit awkward about setting your boundaries there because you're not sure your worth is up there yet. And I think it really is about the stronger of an internal relationship you have with yourself, the easier it'll be to fully understand what you want and what your boundaries are, regardless of the surroundings. And I don't think that changes that much over time. It really is, that's the key domino. Once you're able to be at peace with the person you are, that's what really makes all the difference.
So as soon as you can live your true self, you're sorted, like authentic as fuck, done.
It's not that you're sort of authentic as fuck and all that kind of jazz. It's just that what others say or how they will judge you for these boundaries, it doesn't really matter. So that's why it's not difficult enforcing them.
I was saying that tongue in cheek because like, what you're saying is entirely correct. I just don't think people can move from where they are now to that in like one like workshop over a weekend.
I'll say this, man, the proof is in the pudding. I can tell you that, like, I've seen people do this. And I've seen the change it causes. If it's uncomfortable for them at first, absolutely. But they still do it. It's like, they're always going to be, let's put it this way. No one's going to be 100% self-assured. There's always going to be a little bit of doubt. That's a courage gap you got to jump. And once you understand how, like, what you really want, and you're starting to be like fairly at peace with yourself, you can make that little courage jump and just say, this isn't for me anymore, to be really clear about it. It's like, I think and honestly, like, I don't love how you're talking about this.
Right.
Because you're saying this is hard. I'm like, yes, but this is what's necessary. And I think that's the big realization.
Yeah. I think I'm trying to figure it out, basically. Like, this is not me being obtrusive or obstructive. It's me literally like trying to visualize that kind of end goal. And maybe I'm visualizing it wrong. Maybe I'm thinking about it wrong. But yeah.
I think you're thinking about it externally. You're saying, okay, Emil from 5 years from now, he'll have different goals. So those goals will have to be protected in different ways. He'll have to have set different boundaries.
Yeah.
I don't think so. I think if Emil in 5 years from now was fully at peace with himself, he would be able to create the boundaries with the same amount of ease. Forget about what they are, but they establish them and enforce them with the same amount of ease as Emil from 20 years from now and 30 years from now.
Yeah.
And that's the key point.
And I suppose what I'm saying is going from normal or whatever to fully self-assured is tough.
That's a process. Yeah.
That's what I mean. That it's not like flick a switch.
Yeah, but okay, but I think the way you go to from, let's call it how you said, normal to fully self-assured, that's not by establishing boundaries. The boundaries are a byproduct of you doing that, having done that already. Yeah. And that's what I think the problem is. People focus too much on enforcing boundaries. And that's like a step number 3 that just happens as a natural byproduct, instead of focusing, really establishing who they are and then being comfortable with that and establishing why they should be comfortable with that, why it's valid for them to be comfortable with that, at peace with themselves. And that's what I'm saying. The more energy is focused on that, the more boundaries just naturally get enforced, because people say like, oh, this is who Emil is. There's no point in me challenging this.
So I agree with that point entirely. And I think for the purposes of the podcast and kind of diminishing returns, we should kind of move on to the next example. But I do think that if I'm thinking this, there's at least a few other people who are thinking along those lines. So I think there is value to the discussion we had. But that last point, I agree. So to sum that section up, focus on being self-assured, focus on what you want, and the boundaries will come as a kind of
the downstream effect.
Exactly.
It's a downstream effect.
Exactly. So in health, it would be focus on living a healthy lifestyle, and losing some fat will be a very pleasant downstream effect. It's putting the horse before the cart kind of thing.
100%. 100%. And that's really like, I can talk about the other case studies, but really that's the overarching principle for all of them. That's really what it is. It's just like establish that and it'll happen as a downstream effect. The other case studies I can talk about are just like, I just want to talk about simple things. People just recognizing sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, go through them at least briefly, because I think with this kind of thing, the more people can relate to this and relate to specific cases, the more they'll be able to implement it, the more it will click. So I think cover them. I mean, we don't need to have that big discussion again, but cover them for sure.
Okay. So an example that's interesting that just came up. So a couple of people are starting out the Mindset Accelerator, and they asked me about establishing boundaries, and I let them see the interview we did here with Scott a couple episodes back, and how he talked about having to let go of a lot of people in his life and how that was really challenging. And I think boundaries is the toughest thing, where you still feel a pull from your past, as far as like, I owe these people something, even if you don't really, but it's just a sense that you owe them something because they helped you without really wanting to help you. So for example, Scott, it was a lot of the people he hung out with in jiu-jitsu. Like they facilitated a place for him to train and do something he really enjoyed, but they weren't positive people. And a lot of them like really, really ruined their life. They live in Bangkok. There's a lot of ways there you can really turn your life into the wrong direction. And he still felt obliged to be friendly with them, to help them, because they're in a way helping him just by being his training partners, even though they don't have that intentionality. They're not actually making a conscious effort to sacrifice something for him. And I think that's a really big thing to recognize, that sometimes these people who have contributed in our lives in some way, we have to have the humility to recognize that if we want to get to where we want to get to, this doesn't work. We're not Superman. We can't put everybody on our back and go. I think having that humility to say, I have to set boundaries also from a place of humility, that if I want to get to where I want to get to, I can't afford to do this. It's just not possible. That's very freeing, because guilt, like you said, that whole self-assurance, it's not 100%. We still have guilt. We still feel bad about it. But if we can come from it from a place of humility, it relieves a lot of that.
Yeah. And I like that you frame that as humility, because a lot of people will see that as savage and wanting to please people. But then I think what happens, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that you resent those interactions, even though you're trying to be there for those people. You resent them because you're not quite living your true self, where you want or know you should be. And therefore they sense the resentment, and actually no one is being served by that relationship. So you dragging it along is not helping them like you think you are, and it's not helping you for sure.
To be honest, that may be true. That's never just how I thought about it. I thought about it from honestly a more pragmatic, I guess, perspective of saying, who are the people in your life that you actually care about and you want to help? You have to choose. You can't help everybody. You can't put everybody in your back, especially those who don't actually want to go for the ride. And like how you were saying with those people that were making fun of you for building your personal brand on Instagram, and here you are today, like those are the people that you don't actually want to help in your life. And I think establishing that, who do I actually care about their opinion of me and who do I not? Again, that'll allow you to enforce boundaries because you're saying these people are, it's not relevant what they think. It doesn't serve me. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a slightly different example, as in those WhatsApp people were actively negative influence. They were being dicks. Whereas this is kind of, they're not bad people. They're just,
that's when it's harder actually. That's when you
sure.
have to enforce the boundaries even more strict because you can't you can't just write them off. Oh, they're being negative people.
They've done nothing wrong. Exactly.
But so that's the thing. They have done nothing wrong, but their presence is doing something wrong in your life.
Correct.
And that's the recognition. Now, with that comes a sense of guilt, but they're good people, they're polite, whatever it may be. And that's when you have to have the humility. So you know what? I can't move forward if they're still going to be like this. That's just the reality.
I agree. I hear you. And that's where I kind of think that kind of justification in air quotes is, it can kind of help people see how that makes sense logically. It's a process that people can go through to say, this isn't serving either of us. So it's not that I'm cutting them loose and, you know, they're going to drown. Actually, this is not serving either of us. It's not serving them. It's not serving me. Maybe this is a bullshit justification, but it might. Go on.
Yeah, it's like the word justification is interesting. I just think it's an honest realization. It's not a justification. It's just the truth. That's the reality of it. It's like I was saying, like they're going to drown even if you help them or even if you don't. Some people just want to drown. Honestly, some people just want to stay in the same place they are.
Yeah.
You being there or not is not going to make any difference. It's only going to impact you negatively. For them, honestly, it might impact them positively. It might feel like, oh, I get to talk shit, or I get to say this, or I get to do that. I feel good about myself for a little tiny bit.
I mean, I spoke to my therapist a lot about this last year. Some people just don't want to be helped, and you trying to help them is negative for both them and for you. And like, just to be clear, or at least from my point of view, this is much less about like pure, like, all right, if people earn less, then, you know, you need to ditch them, that kind of bullshit. It's not about money. It's about energy. It's about mindset. It's about so many other things.
The set of values as well.
It sets exactly that. So just to be clear, this isn't simply about, oh, I just need to hang out with, you know, 20-figure entrepreneurs. Otherwise it's fucking pointless. It's so much more in depth than that.
So just to double down on what you're saying, I think one of the most exhausting experiences we have in life are when we're trying to upkeep our values against people who don't have the shared values. And we're in a situation where we really have to fight to maintain that. So if you're a very ethical person, like this was Scott's example, like he really wants to be an ethical person who does good by people, and he's a family man and so on and so on. And you have people that are doing very much the opposite things. That's going to create an energy drain.
Yeah.
And I think that's why you have to humility say, like, I can't deal with this energy drain. Same thing with the guy from the accelerator who just left that similar WhatsApp group to yours. Probably. It was probably an energy drain. He was like, I don't want to do this with my life, but man, these people have been with me for a long time. I met them at school, whatever it may be, but it's an energy drain. Setting those boundaries, that gives you all the energy to do the positive things you want in your life.
Yeah. And
can I wrap this podcast up with a bar?
With a bar?
With a bar. Oh, you don't know that?
No. Oh no. I think I do know, actually. I've seen the notes. Go on.
You see the notes. I love this. Like, so first off, I'm a Jay-Z fan. He has so, like, you don't get from where he was to where he is without having a tremendous amount of wisdom, honestly. And I love this one song. It says, if you can't already see, I ain't worried about y'all because I'm already me. And it really is all that is. It's like, if you're already you and you're comfortable with yourself, you don't worry as much about other people. And that's what I'm trying to say about this whole boundary stuff. Focus on being comfortable with you. The boundaries will happen as a byproduct. It really is that simple. It's not easy, but it's simple.
I think that's a great way to round off that podcast. That sums it up. Let's not spoil it by saying any more.
Sounds good. We'll see you guys on the next episode.